Hey guys, welcome to an episode of InRange. I'm here with Atun-Shei for this month's Q&A in this very beautiful, gentrified, low-rent part of New Orleans, in fact.
Yeah, $800 a month, this place. I'm thinking about moving in.
This is where people can actually afford to live anymore.
Yeah,
yep.
True.
That's how it works in the economy we're in today. I want to thank you for being here today.
Of course.
It's always a
anytime,
pleasure.
Bro. Anytime.
Got a bunch of questions here. So some of them are just for me, but mostly they're kind of for both of us.
Okay, work.
So I got one here from Nairam. What bias has either of you had which challenged you during your research experience and led to a change of perspective? So something that we were researching that you thought you were going to know and then realized, this is different than I thought.
Well, you've always got to keep your eye out for your own biases and your kind of your own little shitty opinions that, it's what's that old adage that it's just like the things that you know are the things that just aren't true, and that's very much true in historical research too, where you kind of have a certain a certain perspective on events, and then you kind of dig deeper into it, and that becomes very quickly challenged. One of my if not my sort of favorite period to study King Philip's War, I kind of took a bit of a turn on, because there's a lot about that war that in the traditional histories that portrays it as a very sort of even-keeled conflict, right? Sort of a conflict between two pretty evenly matched sides, but in the last several years of research about it, a lot of that I think comes from the English perspective, because it was so terrifying that native warriors would just pop out of the woods and attack, and it was this scary, brutal thing. But in actuality, you look at what was kind of going on in a lot of native communities, and they were just constantly being hounded by English rangers and slave catchers, and and they were kind of constantly living on the run and stuff like that. And it becomes very apparent that it was that the sort of loss of life on the native side was and the sort of level of brutality on that side was far greater by many orders of magnitude than the traditional histories speak of. And you don't want to necessarily be seen as taking sides in a war, but at the same time, it's kind of just this is kind of what happened, and I know it makes the English look bad, but this is kind of where the evidence sort of took me.
Kind of looks bad.
Yeah, and sort of, if people think, oh, that looks bad, then that's kind of, their own interpretation, I guess, because sort of the more you look into King Philip's War, the more tragic it seems for the Wampanoag, Nipmuc, and Narragansett in particular.
They didn't have much of a choice, really.
No, yeah.
I find that a lot when it comes to topics of indigenous issues.
Sure.
In that sometimes it goes both directions, and I'm going to answer this question too. So this isn't a video I've done yet, but one of the ones I want to do is about the 1886 San Carlos Breakout, which is Geronimo and a lot of his crew and others who are very important as well. And in researching it, there were 3 reasons that they broke out of San Carlos. So first of all, for those that don't know, there had been a Chiricahua reservation in the southeastern part of Arizona, and that got dissolved because actually the guy that was running it was considered too friendly to the indigenous people. So they decided, and they then took them, let's say, concentrated them at the San Carlos reservation.
Yeah.
Interesting reason, and that's why that word became something relevant later.
Yeah.
But regardless of that, when the 1886 revolt happened, or I should say breakout, there were 3 reasons. And when I was researching it, I went, wow, that challenges me too, right?
Yeah.
Because, so one was they were not allowed to make Tiswin, which is a low alcohol yield corn beer. They said you can't make Tiswin anymore.
Yeah.
They also said you can't do the ghost dance, which there's been a video on InRange about the ghost dance. Can't do that anymore. And then the third reason that really made the group say, oh, that's it, we're breaking out, was they were told they could no longer beat their wives. And so, terrible, of course, right? History has terrible on all sides. So those 2 first reasons, you can't make your own indigenous drink and you can't do a religious ceremony.
Yeah.
That's a horrible restriction against one's rights.
Yeah.
Saying you can't beat your wives, I kind of agree with that one, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to the issue of why the 1886 breakout happens, of course, there's lots of things that led up to that, including God, how many decades of warfare and genocide. But that being the third and most no, we're done, that's challenging. Yeah. Because as a person, I'm like, well, it's hard to pick sides on that particular issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's one that challenged me when I found that out. And there's a video on that coming someday.
Cool.
Jacob P. Oh, this one's for me. What low-budget gun purchase would you recommend for a broke Old West enthusiast? You know, honestly, I mean, obviously the cheapest stuff, Jacob, is cap and ball, but it's also the biggest pain in the ass because you got to learn how to do a cap and ball, which is like being an alchemist. You're like pouring the powder and the ball and the thing, and then it doesn't work, and you get frustrated and give up. That's the cheapest because cap and ball isn't considered legally a firearm, and as a result, it doesn't have excise taxes on it. And so you can get a cap and ball revolver for like a functional one for like $300 or even less. But then you got to learn how to use it. So what I would recommend for someone that wants to get into Old West stuff, but not deal with that, is Cimarron, Uberti, all those importers. There's a number of really low cost or lower cost. Pieta too. Single action armies, the traditional 1873 Colt, 45 Colt. You can get a Pieta for like $400. It's an actual firearm because you have to go through an FFL in 4473, but you don't have to deal with the alchemy of cap and ball. And so for $400, that's about as low as you're going to get.
Your light is on your phone, by the way, Carl.
Oh, I like it that way. I don't know if you noticed that, but there we go. I got two questions here that are really the similar question, and they kind of work for both of us. So I'm going to read them both because I didn't want to leave either one out. RGB. With the recent Wounded Knee video and other examples, we can see how disarmament has put marginalized groups at risk. Is there an example either you can think of where a marginalized group was able to defend themselves with arms against the government or a majority effectively? And the other one, which is similar, Troy H. You've both covered on your respective channels events of resistance against federal or local government by marginalized groups, where it generally does not work out for the opposing party. Well, there's reasons for that.
Yeah.
Has there been a case where you can think of an armed insurrection against an authority where it actually ended favorably for the terms engaging in the resistance? So, I mean, I know they're asking for a specific example. And that's a little harder to give, but can you think of any from your work?
Any successful ones? I mean, again, King Philip's War, the War of the Northern Theater with the Abenaki on the coast of Maine, forcing the English to sign, for once, a treaty that was detrimental to European American interests. And also just stripping a large amount of the coastline from English control. So certainly, in those dynamics were quite sort of something like a revolt of enslaved people, which is a much more direct, underclass rising up.
Sure.
But it was certainly a group that the English thought of as being sort of subject to them, sort of then kind of fighting back in a big way and winning. But I mean, you've covered quite a few things. I mean, wasn't there the Cherokee gunfight against the Klan?
Yeah, that was the Lumbee.
Yeah,
actually, the Lumbee. And that's an example.
Yeah,
there's a video on the channel about the Lumbee. The Catfish Cole came into town to do an anti-race mixing event, and the Lumbee showed up with a menagerie of different types of weapons, including like single-shot shotguns. It's on InRange, and pretty much surrounded them and broke the light, and the Klan ran for their lives. Now, no one was killed, but the Klan like terrified and ran. It's an example of when you shine the light on the cockroach, it tends to scurry away.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one example, and thank you for that one. But there's actually so many, and that's the thing that I want to cover more of that over time. There's a book called This Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed. I highly recommend that as an interesting read. I mean, it goes up from the way back to even most recent times where a group actually armed themselves with M1 Garins and old steel pots and defended themselves against the Klan coming into town.
Oh, shit.
They actually dug fighting positions.
Wow.
And I can't remember the exact location. I apologize. I mean, I'm aware of the event, but not the specific.
Sure.
Maybe an InRange video someday, but it's in the book.
Yeah.
And they had actually trained with M1s. And when the Klan started showing up, they started shooting it down at the ground, not at the people, because they didn't want to necessarily kill anyone. And the gunfire was enough to be like, "We're done, we're out."
Yeah,
there's a great example there. I mean, Amistad.
Oh man,
slave ship,
of course.
Right, that's a great one. There's a video coming actually from Grinnell, Iowa, from when I was at Cornfield Brutality, in which 4 black men that were called fugitives, through having guns, defended themselves against a mob. So that'll be coming in a month or two on InRange.
Well,
there's lots of these.
Yeah, well, actually, now that you mention it, there's a. I'm all here. I'm forgetting things, but there's a great book that came out fairly recently in the past 3 years or so about violent resistance from black abolitionists during kind of late American slavery. I don't remember the title or the author, but there was a lot in there about how black abolitionists, you kind of hear about Frederick Douglass, and he was an early proponent of nonviolence, but certainly by the time of John Brown and the Civil War and stuff, he had kind of come around to, well, there's sort of got to fight fire with fire here. But there were a lot of lesser known black abolitionists who were kind of constantly trying to pull white abolitionists to, no, we need to be armed and we need to resist violently because, especially in light of things like the Fugitive Slave Act and Fugitive Slave Law and stuff, and where, the federal government was not only sort of not helping, but enforcing, these draconian laws based on race and stuff, and it was kind of for a lot of black abolitionists, it was sort of they were either going to fight, and if they couldn't fight, they were going to just leave. They were going to go to Central America or something. And there was a big movement of free blacks as well. There was violent resistance, or sort of the advocation for violent resistance, but also a lot of people were just like, maybe we should just go to Belize. Maybe we should just like get out of here. And certainly. Yeah, that sort of ended, slavery didn't end peacefully.
You just triggered an obvious answer. Haiti.
Oh, shit.
I mean, for gosh sakes, an actual enslaved revolt that forms an army and takes over the country.
Yeah.
And which was the impetus of other revolts that happened in other places. People saw the Haitian Revolution and went, oh.
Yeah.
And by the way, they succeeded. They militarily took over that place. And the reason Haiti isn't even a better place now isn't because of that, because they did free themselves. It's because the world was so shitty that they allied against this now free nation.
Yeah.
Because they're like, we're not going to let you economically succeed now that you've done this revolution. But the revolution through armed revolt worked.
Yeah, exactly.
They overthrew, they terrified their...
Yeah, just a lot of like foreign policy decisions, and also just, as is the case in, so many of these violent resistance movements, these like one or two power-hungry assholes who, kind of like took advantage of the situation to kind of like prop themselves in power and become kings and emperors and, make it worse for everybody and stuff. And but yeah, I mean that is a great.
I mean that's an example right there for sure. Yeah. Another one that pops in mind. Gosh, there's really so many. Another thing, which isn't exactly what you're asking, but I think still fits, is if you're familiar with the now what's considered dance and martial art of capoeira. Like, that was not necessarily like a grouped armed resistance, but capoeira is essentially dancing disguised, well, it's combat disguised as dancing. And it was a way for when the opportunity arose as a fugitive to use this, what you were doing was dancing on the weekends just for entertainment and recreation, or at least they thought you were.
Yeah.
And then a couple of moves and you would take someone out. Yeah. And capoeira is still extant in that regard. And these people that used it to escape their master landed up forming communes like in the swamp where you don't go there because you die, right? And so that's an example of, while they didn't necessarily change the geopolitical landscape, they made a free community and used a martial art as a tactic to do it.
Totally.
There's a lot of these, honestly.
Yeah. They're on.
Well, this dovetail too. Iraha. Are you going to make a video someday about the Free State of Jones? This is for both of us. Yeah. Not necessarily the movie, but the actual historical event.
Maybe. I don't know. We will see. I don't have a particular sort of, that's not really my area of expertise.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly get requests to review the movie a lot. Here's my review. It was okay.
I feel the same way.
It was all right.
It got Hollywooded out a bit.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty accurate. And I feel like this kind of the spirit of the time was pretty well captured. But yeah, it's just kind of fun.
Yeah. Jeff K, this one's more for you than me. Although maybe we can both have it. What did cavalry battles look like in the Civil War? Were they great Napoleonic charges, or dismounted dragoons, or something else?
Yeah, no, not vast majority were not these great Napoleonic charges. There was dismounted combat. It was, a lot of cavalry stuff in the Civil War was just messy and bloody and awful, just like the whole Civil War. But I mean, you look at something like East Cavalry Field in Gettysburg, and that was, I believe, correct me in the comments and be sure to call me an idiot if I'm wrong, but I believe East Cavalry Field was the largest cavalry engagement in the Civil War, and it was just chaos. It was just utter nonsense. Like, there was one big dramatic charge that Custer, of course, did. But apart from that, it was just utter chaos. Commanders didn't really know what was going on. It didn't really, there were sort of these grand ideas, certainly on the part of Jeb Stuart and Robert E. Lee, to sort of turn it into this sort of like grand movement that would win the day and stuff. But But yeah, that all quickly fell apart, very, very quickly. And in fact, a lot of people in East Cavalry Field on the Confederate side, there were a couple of Virginia regiments in particular who were just like, fuck this, and they dismounted and they booked up their horses somewhere and they just like went into a barn and took cover and started shooting out the windows. It's just, it's kind of what I think, it definitely was not this grand Napoleonic thing, that's for sure.
So, I mean, my understanding of it, and you're more researched on this than I, but like my understanding is the cavalry was typically used as a tool of fast movement, an attempt to outflank the enemy.
And reconnaissance.
But right, of course. But the actual combat that they engaged in was almost always dismounted. You would put the horses to the side or like lash them up somewhere so they wouldn't break and run. You would break off and you'd form a line. But the difference between you and infantry is you could get on a horse and like move real fast and then form another line.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because they didn't really fire from the horse. Like that whole thing was not very often.
No.
I don't know if you've ever tried to fire on the move in a stable vehicle. It's a very difficult thing to do. I can't imagine doing it from a horse at any distance. I'm not talking about point blank. I'm talking about like over there, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That's a challenging idea in general. Henry S. For both of us, if you could go anywhere in the world to do some historical content, where would you go and why?
Greenland.
For Leaf?
Yeah.
Yeah?
For Leif or Ericsson. Maybe that'll happen. I would love to, you'll have forgotten about this by the time I do it, if I ever do, but so it's not really a spoiler. But I would love to do one of my annual Leif Erikson Day specials and start it off as a normal video and then say something like, I'd love to sort of get a better handle on this, and the best way is to, have your feet on the ground, and then film myself, flying to New York City or whatever and waiting around there for 2 days, and then flying up to Reykjavik or whatever and waiting around there for a day, and then flying to Greenland and then taking a train down, and sort of doing that whole thing. And there is a great, in the village that is the current village where Leif Erikson lived, there is a hostel called the Leif Erikson Hostel. So
is there really?
Imagine myself going there and staying for a week or two and filming and going on hikes.
It's kind of an incredibly tiny population.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's like, 12 people.
Because Greenland is the place that's frozen and Iceland is less so.
Yes, yeah. Although, southwestern Greenland is nice.
That's where everybody's at, right?
Yeah. There's people on the coasts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Nuuk is the biggest city. It's on the western coast, and it's and I mean it's cold as shit, but it's it's a pretty sizable for Greenland type of city, and it's kind of a port town and stuff, and apparently there's a pretty killer art scene there. So,
really?
Yeah,
I had no idea.
Yeah,
I thought it was a place that was like at best Spartan in terms of population.
I think it is pretty sparse, but there's definitely like. But there's a shitload of culture.
I'm sure there is, of course. Places that are islands that have been left generally unmolested.
Yeah.
Kind of retaining these things.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Iceland does for its own right too, from a Nordic perspective.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Like if you want to look at old Norwegian culture, you're not going to find it.
Yeah.
The closest you're going to find is Iceland, not Norway,
because it still got
it got stuck there.
Kind of thing.
It's like the language is closer, the horses are still there, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There's an app you need on your phone if you're going to hook up at the bar to make sure she's not.
She's not your
cousin. Yeah. I mean, that's true, actually.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah.
For me, mine's a little bit different, and it'll never happen. But I've never seen anyone do it either. I would want to go down to Guyana and do the Jonestown tragedy. And I think about that is not the tragedy of the mass murder, which is terrible, but the part of it where the congressman was going to the airport to leave and talk about the actual gunfire that happened there. I've seen some of this before.
Yeah.
But like they showed up there with, I think it was AKs, and they slaughter these people trying to get on the plane. And I haven't seen anyone really talk about the actual gun part of it that much.
Yeah.
It's not that big. It's not really a gun fight because there wasn't really an exchange of fire more than or there wasn't an exchange of fire. There was a one-way direction of fire. But I mean, that'd be an interesting thing to be like, this is the air strip, and like this is where that kind of almost forensic type discussion.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that would be fascinating.
That's one that pops in my brain. Eric S. Oh, this is way more you.
Okay.
What was, in your opinion, the dumbest military maneuver after Pickett's charge during the Civil War?
Oh, during the Civil War? The whole Fredericksburg debacle comes to mind. Battle of the Crater comes to mind. But there were a ton. I mean, the strategists and commanders in the Civil War were amateurs. I mean, it's yeah, I mean, people in Europe kind of thought they were kind of adorable, and sort of, these guys were.
Oh, they're playing war.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some people had experience from Mexico and stuff like that, but yeah, these were not, the best of the best. A lot of these people just kind of made it up as they went along. I mean, a lot of the people we think of today as being sort of these grand masters of the art of war were just kind of, Stonewall Jackson was a fucking dorky professor and kind of a weirdo, and then he's like, oh my God, this amazing general, but yeah, he didn't do anything. I mean, that was just kind of, I guess, raw talent and instinct. And of course his overinflated reputation, which is a huge part.
It makes me think of sci-fi, where you think of. I know no one likes this anymore, but The Walking Dead. Yeah. It was like season 2 or 3 or whatever. The one with the governor, the guy that killed the kid. But like they were like he was like this military leader that was whatever. Yeah. But like when they're asked, "What'd you do before this?" I was a teacher. Like it was like whenever was inspired by that.
Yeah. No, I mean for sure. Well, I think that's like. Although I do think that kind of speaks to something. That is kind of often the case in times of crisis, where sort of often in these sort of huge moments of kind of violent upheaval that you see in a lot of wars and revolutions and sort of kind of mini apocalypses throughout history, oftentimes the big badass 20-year career soldier is the first one to get a bullet in the brain, and the Walter White chemistry teacher is the one who rises to Machiavellian levels of power.
That's an interesting point. In times of stress, it's not always. I mean, obviously, training and such can help.
Sure. Yeah.
But it is not necessarily predictable who will rise to the challenge.
Oh yeah, no man.
It can be very unpredictable.
Yeah.
It's like you think of like the apocryphal stories of the mom lifting the car off her kid.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, there's truth to this.
Yeah.
Like, there are people that just rise.
Yeah.
And you don't really know who they're going to be. They might be the most surprising ones.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So for me, I don't have one for the Civil War because I'm not as well educated on it as you are. But the one I'm going to... By the way, we're suffering for our art because we're getting bit by ants.
Yeah. I'm kind of... it's all right. It's not bad.
They're not that bad, but we're suffering for our art.
I mean, honestly, like when I sleep, they just kind of... I mean, that's my cot.
I mean, cheap. We can't... $800 a month.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they crawl over me. It's fine. We're friends.
The one I can think of, and it's also a New Orleans... Well, it's a New Orleans thing, even though it's not Civil War, is just the Battle of New Orleans. I mean, where he sends the Scottish... Highlanders in a 45-degree angle across the battlefield, an open field of fire, while they're taking fire from directly in front of them, from across the river, and from the swamp.
Yeah.
All at once.
Yeah.
And they're getting slaughtered to the point where the American side just was like, they cheered for them. So
yeah.
They just stopped shooting. They're
yeah.
Wow.
Exactly.
And to be the general that ordered that, first of all, what an asshole.
Yeah.
And he later gets shot off his horse, which is pretty dope. Like that was pilled, right? But I mean the fact that that was one of the dumbest. I mean, I call it racist. The people in the audience were like, I don't know, blah 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 blah. But I mean, I don't know that you would have done that with someone that wasn't Scottish. Let's put it that way, as the general, or maybe he thought they would be shock troops. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they were like Napoleonic. I mean, that was a fairly famed regiment too.
Whatever his motivation,
it might have also been that he was just like, oh well, they're like super tough, so they can take it.
And he got them slaughtered.
Yeah, he got completely slaughtered. Well, I mean, and the Battle of New Orleans was sort of like. The battle was over before it began. Like it was a question of kind of maneuver, right? And just like, and just the British kind of failed to. Yeah, geography won that battle for
but that particular general seemed to be of arrogance unusually bad.
Yeah. Edward Pakenham. Yeah,
he was terrible.
Yeah.
It's not Civil War, but it's a good answer.
Yeah.
And why? Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. For both of us, what period of U.S. history is closest to what we're experiencing now? Well, I bet we're going to have the same answer.
You are.
I get to go first?
Yeah, go first. Yeah.
Quite honestly, the 1940s and 50s, just before the Civil War.
Or you mean 1840s?
Excuse me, 1840s and 50s, which is, like I said, 1940s, excuse me. And that scares me.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little better at the moment, but there's been these moments in very recent history, where I think when I look at what's going on, I'm like, this certainly looks, it's not as geographically stratified, it's more like distributed, but the cultural, I'm going to use the word cultural, but also belief system, whatever, is so broken and irreparable. There's no common ground to have anymore. Yeah. And it might be okay because in certain times there is no common ground to have. Yeah. There's no common ground to have with fascists. There's no common ground to have with Nazis. Yeah. There is no common ground. It is an intolerable circumstance.
Exactly.
And maybe that's where we're at. Yeah. And it does feel like that at times. But regardless of that, let's not get political per se. And my answer is, the 1840s and 50s look the most similar. I hope we can avoid that.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what I feel.
I totally get that. You know, I do honestly. If I mean, you know, if I had to pick a time, I'd probably say that. But I also think that, like, you know, it's important to put this stuff in perspective, right? Like there is, you know, throughout the 1840s and 50s, you know, Congress people on the floor of the House would like beat the shit out of
No,
each
that's
other.
true.
You know what I mean? And like out in Kansas and Missouri, like, you know, there was a fucking war going on in Kansas and Missouri, you know, before the Civil War, and we don't have anything like that yet, and hopefully we will not. But you know, I do think that
there's a couple Congress people I wouldn't mind watching.
Oh, I mean, sure,
getting some beat down on TV. To be honest.
That's true.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, but I definitely see like, so I don't think we are quite there yet. Yeah, in fact, I think we're doing a lot better than we were in the 1850s, certainly. But I do think that like that. When you, and again, not to get too like kind of crazy political, but it's no secret that, you know, there are, I mean, your viewers can know exactly what I'm talking about sort of a lot of these like very armed, very gross, very organized fascist groups and movements who are just like waiting for an opportunity to start gunning people down in the street, right? Like, and so I think like something like Bleeding Kansas could arise out of that, and obviously that's not a secret. Like pundits talk, I mean, fucking it's on CNN, right? It's not just on the dark corners of the internet.
Well, we've seen it already. I mean, we've already seen. The one just got me real good. We've seen attempts at that already.
Yeah, we've seen attempts, but we haven't seen, you know, Bleeding Kansas yet.
Well,
you know, and hopefully we never.
It only takes one, right?
Yeah.
That's the fear.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
And you know, and I mean, certainly your buddy Robert Evans, you know, has a lot to say about this.
Oh yeah, his entire body of work.
Well, just in stuff like, you know, that it would only take a kind of a couple of weirdos up in the hills with enough guns to, you know, cut off water supplies for swaths of the country and stuff like that. That stuff does worry me, but I think that is something like that would need to happen for us to have like a one-to-one sort of comparison to the late 1850s, and so thankfully, I just think it's important to keep these things into perspective. But I definitely
don't mean to be hyperbolic.
No. I know. I just like I do want to offer like a little bit of hope.
Maybe I should say 1830s, 40s before we're at the point of the 50s.
Yeah. No. I mean,
but there's that.
Your point is like very well taken. Like there are like absolutely a lot of parallels, for sure.
Yeah. Not great.
Yeah. No, not great at all.
Oh, this one's important. Doug G.
Mm-hmm.
When am I going to show you proper Black Power firearms? And when is the Witchfinder General going to participate in a two-gun match?
I mean, I would love that, but only if, you know, I had a tomahawk at the end of a rope that I could.
I saw that in a movie recently.
Yes.
That comes up later.
Okay,
cool.
So I mean, yeah, of course, I got to make it out there.
It'd be fun. It'd be awesome. Amon B, this one's for you. Have you ever shot a muzzleloader?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have. Yes. Yeah. Honestly, it's. I love shooting muzzleloaders. I think it's wonderful.
They're really fun,
and I'd love to kind of get better at it too and do it more.
They're frequently. I think they're more fun than modern.
Oh, I agree. I completely agree. I mean, there's something just very satisfying about you know.
It feels like a lot of. It's technically less power in many ways, but it feels like more power.
Yeah.
And there's just a
smoke and
there's just a life to it.
Yeah.
It's weird. They're like they feel energetic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And someone asked me the same. Amon also asked, and for me, do I prefer Flint or Percussion? Percussion is obviously technically more capable, but I actually enjoy Flint.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Me too.
Jordan W. This is a touchy one too.
Mm-hmm.
Are firearms rights or privileges, depending on this country, a losing battle? Tragedy seems to galvanize support for restrictions moving forward, but the representatives who support easing gun restrictions often want to curtail other liberties. Yeah, it's right. It tends to be, if you're pro-firearms or pro-self-defense, you're put into this giant bag with a bunch of other shit you don't want to be associated with. And if you're for other liberties, which I am, you seem to be put in the bag of being against firearms. And it's that is a weird dichotomy that frankly, that the system, I'm going to use that as a term, seems to want to put us in.
Sure.
Because the truth is, you don't have to give up one for the other, and we shouldn't have to give up one for the other.
Yeah.
Liberty should be liberties,
yeah.
And so by allowing ourselves to think of it as a binary coin means we're going to live on the edge of that binary coin.
Yeah, it's a very tribal kind of thing that we should resist, right? I mean, it just shouldn't like necessarily. I mean, like you said, there kind of comes a point where it's like I can't identify with that, or there's nothing about an intolerant ideology that I have to tolerate.
Right.
But but at the same time, you know, I think it is important to resist those tribal binaries, you know, Yeah.
Which I think we're seeing to a degree, at least culturally. Maybe not legally, but never mind that. Justice doesn't come from the courts. We talked about this in the upstairs lounge video. It comes from people acting and making it happen. And so hopefully InRange has made this message very clear. Like, there is a large movement, and it's a lot of us, and we have to do this together. But there's a lot of us that want to allow a trans person to go get their HRT while being armed, while their neighbor is going to the reproductive rights clinic and the other guy's growing marijuana, right? Like, that should be the freedom we have. It's your body, it's your life. If you're not infringing on someone else, like the actual libertarian left ideals, not the libertarian right ideals, which is actual individual freedom as long as it doesn't occur upon others with a sense of community. It's a real possible thing. But there's always someone that doesn't want it.
Yeah, well, and there's also like the, you know, as far as which one your patron was talking about, like the politicians who often advocate for kind of restricting firearms and stuff. I mean, you know, it's sort of like a lot of that kind of has to be, you know, the concerns. Maybe there needs to be like a little bit more outreach from kind of more sort of just like not toxic gun rights advocates toward sort of your kind of milquetoast, I guess, sort of liberal person who maybe, you know, has sort of genuine concerns about stuff like mass shootings and
which are legit and real.
But, you know, sort of so I think, like, you know, maybe kind of outreach is the solution. Again, I'm talking out of my ass. You guys, I think
part of that is like, it's such an easy, like, liberal left-wing talking point to talk about guns. But they're either are ignorant of or don't care, and I'm not sure which is the scarier of the two, of the reality of how that disappropriately affects marginalized people. When you take away these things, like, obviously we don't want some of the stuff that's going on, but the truth is those laws really don't prevent that. They won't. Not here, not in this country. Maybe somewhere else. Not here. It's too late for that. So doing what they're doing or trying to do actually disarms people of color, working people, you know, whatever marginalized situation you want to talk about, socially, all of that, that's who it really affects. So they're not going to take them away from the rich or essentially affluent white bigot. I'm not saying all bigots are white or either. I mean, it goes everywhere. I'm not saying that. But that's not who it's going to affect.
But they certainly
it's going to affect the person that needs it to defend themselves on the street from the aforementioned problem.
They've got an image in their mind of like who the sort of person may be that this is going to affect, and it's not.
That's not correct.
But yeah, I mean, and well, also I think a lot of it just kind of comes from, you know, maybe like a little bit too much trust in government. You know.
I don't trust it very well, to be honest.
No.
I'd like to. I really want to.
Sure.
Denver S. Have either of us considered making content on John Brown? I'll get that first. I already did. It's filmed. It's going to go up later. But a little bit. It's not a big deep dive, but I'm sure I will eventually. This one's you. Aiden B. What was the puritanical or Puritan view of people keeping and bearing arms?
Ooh, this is a good one. So actually, this directly ties into what we were just talking about.
I feel like they're hunters. Like, they didn't see it as anything other than like hunting.
Well, but
there was the militia too.
Yeah, I was going to say. So the idea of like the Minuteman, you know, I've got my rifle, I'm protecting my home, and I'm ready to join my militia and fight against tyranny. Right? That doesn't come from nowhere, and that was very much a Massachusetts thing. And it comes from, you know, that kind of frontier life where you know, and in Massachusetts' laws and liberties of 1647, it specifically says that that men of the colonies, English men of the colonies, should have muskets in their homes as for the mutual defense, right? So not just the defense of the home and of their families and of their communities, but of the colony as a whole, right? So it being called into the militia. However, and this is kind of where, you know, kind of gets spicy, it was also explicitly forbidden to arm Native Americans,
of course,
in the Massachusetts.
And I'm sure enslaved people and people of color.
Yes, of course. So that's sort of what it kind of came down to. Now, you know, the English sort of old world Puritan idea about bearing arms, I'm not sure. I would imagine. I mean, they were extraordinarily egalitarian folks, so I am sure that they would not be opposed to it. To just ordinary people, you know, being armed. But But yeah, in the colonies, it was very much divided along racial and religious lines. So basically, if you were a white Protestant and gender lines, right? Let's not forget, white Protestant English man, you were expected to be armed. If you were not that, then it was illegal. It was, to be armed.
And this is where this gets confusing, right? Because, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but in regards to that person identified as that, those were the citizens.
Yes.
And
exactly.
therefore, by that weird and frankly racist and bigoted worldview,
yeah, absolutely.
they were all. But it also does mean that the definition of militia was the whole of the citizenry.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was how they define citizenry.
Yeah, exactly.
But when we see now people say the militia is the National Guard, that's really not aligned with the early mindset of militia. If you wanted to consider it the citizenry, so if you could fix the bigoted and racist part of the definition of citizenry, it would be the whole of the people.
Yeah, exactly.
With a weapon.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting So it's like all history is like this weird broken line of problems.
Yeah.
But militia is the whole of the people. The problem is how they define the people.
Yeah, well, and there's one of the I think the earliest Virginian gun law as well specifically applied to blacks.
Yep.
So
No, gun control is almost has essentially internally been racist.
Yeah.
Almost consistently across the board, whatever that means. But Robin V. We all know you're a big fan of Aliens. Well, that's me. Are you a big fan of the Alien franchise?
I mean, sure. Yeah, not as big as you, but a big fan. I mean, those movies were amazing.
I'm printing Xenomorphs on my 3D printer, right? But are you also a fan of the Predator movies? And if so, did you like Prey?
Yeah, well, we actually talked about this a few days ago. Yeah, I really like Prey. Not a perfect movie. I do think it is kind of a shame that that this awesome, sort of indigenous lady killing a bunch of people in the woods type movie was sort of connected to a major Hollywood franchise.
Yeah.
I'd kind of like to see that movie, but without the sci-fi stuff. But yeah, I thought it was great. Not perfect, but a lot of fun. It was what it needed to be, right? It's a fun action movie with some nice kills and some
aesthetically beautiful.
Oh yeah.
And also, one of the things I did think they did well was the costuming and such was historically pretty good.
Yeah.
Compared to a lot of movies.
Oh yeah.
Like when they showed the French fur trappers.
Oh man, I loved the French.
Or the Comanche. Great. They did a good job with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, and I was telling Carl this before, the French guys are my favorite characters. I loved them. They were so gross. They were so much fun. And just the Coeur d'Ivoire, right? The runners of the woods, people going out from Quebec and living out in the wilderness of North America for years.
You'd probably get a little weird out there.
You'd probably get a little weird out there. You'd probably get very hairy and very sticky and smelly. and I love how they portrayed them. That was great.
On top of that, so if you're going to watch it, I recommend this. You can stream it on Hulu. And there's an option, if you go do this, to watch it in Comanche with English subtitles.
Yeah.
Freaking awesome.
Yeah.
That was the way I watched it, and it was really cool.
Yeah, and I would love to see more period pieces. Kind of with it would be awesome if all this stuff was in dead languages, kind of apocalypto style. But it would be nice to see kind of more, it's a more sort of indigenous centered period.
Well, mass media doing stuff like this is the way a language doesn't become dead.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Doing it in Comanche, or another example of The Missing, where they had actual Chiricahua Apache in it. That's the way these things don't die.
Yeah,
which is cool. So I'm glad they saw that they did.
Totally.
Did that. Yeah. Okay, here's probably the most important question.
Okay,
from Zach. It's for the Witchfinder General.
All right.
First time, long time. Under the laws of the colony of Massachusetts, how should we punish those who consort with Satan?
I don't know. Maybe we should ask him. Oh, there he is. Those who consort with Satan must be put to instant death. That seemed pretty declarative, Carl.
Yeah, that was pretty declarative.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
No, I don't have any money. No.
All right. All right. Now we know.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. And by the way, I agree. That is the only proper.
Oh yeah,
that is really the only proper thing to do.
Yeah, it's in a book.
Yeah, no, I've read it somewhere. It's in a couple books.
It's in a couple books.
Yeah. Here we go. Canis I. For both of us. Is there any advice you have for looking up information on topics that are not well recorded and considered historic amnesia, or how do you approach it when the info that may be written down may be so biased in any normal history book?
Oh man, I mean, that's tough, right? I mean, it's not even necessarily like normal history books that are biased. It's the primary sources.
Yes.
It's an endless source of endless frustration. It's so hard to I have this, and I guess, kind of been on my brain recently, kind of King Philip's War and King William's War. So I'm sorry to keep kind of going back to it, but it's so hard kind of getting a sort of a real handle that isn't like totally conjectural and educationally irresponsible on sort of like the Native American perspective of a lot of these wars, you know, because there's just like nothing, right? There's just nothing written down, and what is written down are obviously, you know, the super biased English accounts, but also, you know, what few Native sources there are. I mean, it's just like they can be revealing in certain sort of individual circumstances, like land sale documents or treaties, or, you know, or kind of the rare times when the English would quote a native about this, that, or the other thing. But like, but oftentimes it's revealing in only like very specific individual circumstances, right? You can't sort of necessarily say like, okay, and then this commander made this strategic decision, or they went to war for this purpose. Like a lot of it is conjectural, and one thing that is important is talking to a lot of like tribal governments and like Native historians who can inject a lot of cultural understanding into there. But even that only kind of takes you so far, right? That can be super illuminating, but yeah, it can only take you so far, because at the end of the day, you're still just like, don't know, you know? So kind of, for a lot of these events, it is to, you know, you want to be paint as complete a picture as possible, but it's so hard when like the closest stuff that you have were written by these English people who, you know, had their own perspective and that was on these events. I mean, they were there, so that perspective is valid and it's worth exploring, but it's also like when they talk about their enemies, it's kind of just like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, I can't take any of this at face value. So these
savages won't accept when we steal their things and rape them.
Yeah,
what is wrong with them?
Yeah.
We're just bringing them religion.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
but
unironically, yeah.
It does kind of read that way.
Yeah.
On top of that, when you speak of the king to that war, particularly King Philip's War, like, I mean, these are groups that, for the most part, and I don't want to say it, but kind of were eradicated.
Oh my God!
So it's not like you're going to talk to them.
Oh, yeah.
There's not like even a descendant, perhaps. There's not even an oral tradition left.
Yeah.
The oral tradition went.
Yeah, I mean, the Wampanoag, they're still around, but the Pokanoket, who are the kind of the main sort of like tribe who kind of dominated the Wampanoag Confederacy, you know, they're completely gone.
Yeah, they're erased.
They're just like completely gone. And so the sort of the Wampanoag who are left were kind of the Cape Cod and Islands Wampanoag. So, you know, you can talk to that, and you can get, you know, and you can get great insights, but at the same time, like, you can't, you know, there isn't a direct sort of historical record or oral tradition that you can kind of draw from. So it's super frustrating.
The best I can say to that is the best you can do is if you can get first-person accounts.
Yeah.
As best as you can. If it's a recent enough event to talk to people, like that, these are quarterly, that's not.
But the upstairs lounge was so refreshing.
Yeah, because there was actual...
because it was 50 years ago.
And there was video of interviews.
And there was video of interviews, and it was like, this is so easy. Like, true crime people must have it so easy. And I'm sure that, like, we have it easy, just sort of being mostly kind of American history people. I'm sure we have it so easy compared to, like, ancient historians. Like, I feel so sorry for, like, ancient and medieval, like, oh my God. That must be such a struggle.
One example which really hit home for me was when I did the Battle of New Orleans video, which actually talked about the then later destroyed free settlement of Fazanville. Mm-hmm. And that only happened in 1965, and there are people that live there or descendants of people that live there still around, and there's even groups on the internet, including on Facebook, of this.
Yeah, you can just literally send them an email and ask.
Well, when I first started doing the video, I did, and I didn't get a reply, and I can understand why. I'm a white guy doing a video about this situation.
Yeah.
And this isn't your history, right? Like that kind of thing, and I get that because there's a reason for that. They have to be careful because we live in the world we live in.
Yeah.
When the video came out, I actually got an invite to the group and got to be in it.
Oh, cool.
Which is incredibly honoring.
Yeah.
And maybe someday I can revisit that. When it goes a long way. I mean, first of all, that was an honor and humbling, but at the same time, like, people are careful with their history, especially recent history, when they are still at risk.
Yeah.
And so that can be challenging. So if you can get someone that's willing to talk, but you have to prove that you're not going to be that person that's going to not represent them properly, or their worldview or their situation in the process. Because you know how the media manipulates everything, right? Yeah. So it's a challenge. Yeah. That's hard.
No, it absolutely is. All
right, one more for both of us, and then one final done thing.
Okay.
Karnurfriskamahetten. I can't pronounce this. I should be able to because it looks very Scandinavian. Anyways, we have both faced backlash for simply educating about historical events. What criticism surprises you the most?
One of the criticisms, so one thing that kind of really boggled my mind when I first kind of started making YouTube videos about history, or should I say when people started watching them, was people, you could say in a video, the sky is blue. This is because it's the reflection of the oceans or whatever, and that's why the sky is blue. It's the sort of oxygen particles, they reflect the light, and that's why the sky is blue. The sky is blue. And someone will leave a comment or make a video about you or make a Reddit post about you. Atun-Shei said the sky was red. It's just like just the deliberate sort of complete misrepresentation of what it, like when you say it in just plain English. And then it's just like, well, I don't like that. That's I think surprises, amuses, and frustrates me.
You also provide, better than I do for sure, a lot of reference in your work.
Yeah.
Like you'll put numbers in there and even provide references.
Yeah.
So you're making statements that are based on, here, you can go look this up.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that's important, right?
And then I've done that to some degree, and to a certain degree I don't do it nearly like you do, because to be honest, 9 times out of 10, someone will still tell you what's wrong anyway. They could be sitting there like, you could hit the rock with the hammer, and they'll somehow...
They absolutely do, yeah. Well, and it's also like, and look, I get that not everybody is going to follow up on every source in a YouTube video that they're primarily watching for entertainment, right? So like, I get that, but I also think it's important to establish that goodwill, and also that if somebody was just like, oh, I watched a Checkmate Lincolnites episode and I disagreed with the premise, like if they really wanted to, they could fucking write an essay. They could make a response video or whatever. They could dig into my sources and they could say like, okay, well, Andy got this idea from Eric Foner or whatever, and his analysis is flawed. Here's why. Like, and that would
academic
be
retort.
Great. Yeah, that would be great. Would completely support anybody wanting to do that. And it's also important because I'm not a historian, right?
Well, that's how we get to better answers anyway.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, exactly. It is. And, sort of been a big part of the scientific and academic communities, for a long time now. So, so that would be great. Sadly, that doesn't really necessarily seem to happen. But yeah, also, I'm not a historian, right? So like I went to fucking film school. So like, it's important for me to basically say, okay, here's where I got this information, because, and I've got friends here on YouTube who do have PhDs or who do, who are academics and who have written books about this stuff. And it's like, yeah, I'll, like for example, my buddy Justin, Dr. Justin Sledge from the channel Esoterica, he can talk at length about alchemy or the witch hunts or early modern demonology. And I don't need to see any references. Like the dude is like, is an expert on the topic. That it's not necessarily because this man has dedicated his life.
You're willing to take him on his face account because you trust him as a source.
But like me, no, don't take what I have to say. I'm a filmmaker, right? I'm not a historian. So that's why it became.
Well, that's a blurry line. I mean,
it is. Like,
you put a lot of effort into like Checkmate Lincolnites in terms of your work and how
in terms of research. Yeah, and I'm reasonably confident.
Far more than most people do. Lift people on.
Yeah, no, that is very true. I guess
what I'm saying is you're underselling that a bit.
I guess I'm confident in my skills as a researcher, but I also don't want to necessarily. Like, if people want to call me a historian, I will like accept that, I guess. And
sure,
I do think that sort of ultimately, if it's like, okay, if you like are a communicator of history, then that kind of makes you a historian. But I would never like claim that, or have the title of my video be fucking historian thinks that, like,
right, sure,
yeah, that's super conceited, and I don't want to necessarily, and I also don't necessarily want to like be. I don't want to say that shit when there are people who went to school for a decade.
This may sound controversial, though, but I will argue that work like that, from a historical perspective, can matter very much because academia is frequently caught in its own loop.
Yeah.
Right? And so to break out of that loop, it is hard to break out of a loop you're in when you make yourself into the loop.
Yes.
So I'm not trying to say don't be an academic. That's not my point. I'm not here to...
I'll say don't be an academic.
I'm not here for I'm not here for ignorance and endarkenment.
No.
But I am saying that sort of work you're doing, while not generated from the world of academia, but as an academic endeavor, is important from the perspective, providing perspective that may not ever come from that loop of academia.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, certainly in terms of like, yeah, it does make sense. And certainly in terms of communication, right? And sort of like public facing history, like a lot of the stuff that I talk about, and especially in my kind of glitziest videos like Checkmate Lincolnites, like a lot of this information is, you know, like in my last episode, I talked a lot about the some of the authoritarian aspirations of a lot of prominent Confederates. That's like pretty widely accepted in most academic
Some
circles.
of that surprised me, honestly,
Sure.
when I watched it.
It surprised a lot of people.
I didn't know how deeply theocratic it was, too.
Oh, yeah.
Which makes sense, but I didn't know it. Yeah.
But like that's something that's like pretty well established in academic circles. Like, you know, they might not go quite as far as I did in that video, but you know, there was a strain of authoritarian thought in the Confederate intelligentsia. You know, academics agree on that, but you never hear about that.
You don't.
From your traditional outlets of popular Civil War history. And so a lot of that stuff is just sort of effective communication, right? Of just what's already the academic consensus.
Well, one of the things
or what's already been explored.
One of the easy things to do to manipulate a historical narrative or cultural understanding isn't about what you say.
Yeah.
It's about what you don't say.
Yeah.
What you shine your light on makes a point.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
so they're not shining a light on that, and there's probably a reason, right? That's what I would argue.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because it's not popular and therefore I don't get funded,
No.
or it might be I just don't like the way this feels. But like not shining the light on certain things is forming a narrative.
Yeah.
It's what you leave out.
Absolutely.
And that's where the historical amnesia stuff comes from. For me, the thing that's never stops to surprise me, or I'm always surprised by, is the lack of sense of humor from people that have oppositional views to mine. I swear, it sounds stupid and unimportant.
No.
But like I'll post something that like, I won't even go about it here, but if some of you saw my Father's Day joke, which was a joke. It was a dark joke. I laughed when I wrote it.
Yeah.
There are still people out there, whether they are doing it in true faith or just to mess with me, that are arguing that I am actually trying to genocide the white race. And I'm like, I'm not for any genocide of any peoples.
Yeah.
This is obvious by my work. This was a joke.
I thought that tweet was hysterical.
And the fact that they're trying to make an argument that I am is not in good faith.
Yeah.
And I swear, I think some of them actually believe it.
Oh yeah,
and that to me is the thing that really surprises me. The ones that are just not in good faith, that are just trolls, whatever.
Yeah.
But there's clearly people there that really, really think that's what I meant.
Yeah.
And I'm consistently astonished that there's people that would be, I don't know how to put that would actually think that. That's weird to me.
Well, I mean, a lot of it is, right, it's sort of looking for order in a very uncertain world, in a very chaotic world, right? A lot of these conspiracy theories are just sort of a way to put something in a nice little box. And you know, so it's pretty sad and pathetic and pitiful. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that.
Okay, I got last one. This is a gun one.
Okay.
And it's pretty cool. I wasn't that aware of it. I had to do some research on this. Drew S. What firearms might Wenceslao Maguel have been shot with? I might have pronounced that name improperly. I do not speak Spanish. I apologize to anyone out there. But this gentleman was a revolutionary in the Villista army during the Mexican Revolution and was captured by the Federales and sentenced to death by a firing squad and was hit with either 7, 8, or 9 rounds, fell to the ground, and then had a coup de grace with a revolver to his face and survived. He played dead, crawled, and got help and survived this. There's actually, Ripley's Believe It or Not, pictures of this gentleman, which is weird, right? And then when I started looking up, well, what guns would he have been shot with, which is what the question's about. It was easier than if it had been shot by the Villistas, because the Villistas were a ragtag army filled with whatever guns they could get. The Federales had a more consistent armament that they had purchased, not surprisingly, predominantly from Germany. And they were probably armed with 7mm 1895 Mausers. Now, there was also Arasakas and a couple other things, but they were more consistent. And the largest number of rifles in the Federale army was the 7mm 1895 Mauser. So of those 7, 8, or 9 rounds that this guy took, they were probably 7mm Mauser, which is astonishing because that's a full power battle rifle cartridge. And then he got shot in the face. You see a picture of most of his face is missing, like his jaw. And that was the revolver. Revolver's unclear. The revolvers were not standardized, and they had a whole hodgepodge of things. Could have been anywhere from a 1873 Colt single-action Army to a French Army revolver. Don't know. But what we do know is this guy was called El Fusilado, as in the shot, or the shot up, or and he survived this, which is an amazing story.
That's an amazing nickname. Holy shit!
Right? Can you imagine?
That's a Sergio Leone movie right there.
Guy earned it, I guess.
Yeah.
But man, I would not have wanted to earn that title.
Oh my God.
Oof. At any rate, so we're going to go ahead and shut this down. That was all the questions. I want to thank you for doing this.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for having me to your apartment.
Yeah, exactly.
You do need to do something about the ants.
Yeah, I know. I called the Terminix guy. You know, hopefully he'll get here pretty soon. But you know, I mean, I don't know. I had a Terminix guy here before, but like I got hungry, so you know he's there.
Oh, this is a good way to take care of that problem.
It is true. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's definitely. Yeah, I mean, you know, you get a lot of gothy types who come around here. And, yeah, actually, there's a big titty goth girl in here who came to visit. I just got hungry. Sometimes I just get carried away.
Yeah, get a little carried away. Sure.
But yeah, so you can find your way back.
Yeah, no, I do have a question about the goth though. I mean, do they already have like that clove, like ham type flavor because of the cloves?
You know,
smoke the cloves.
Yeah, you know, yeah, it is kind of smoky. Yeah, honestly. But I mean, you know, I think but there's also a bit of a sort of. Almost sort of strawberry kind of a hint of kind of strawberry in there. You know, I don't know what that's from, but yeah, very sweet. Goth girls are very sweet. Goth guys can be kind of sour. But,
amazing.
Yeah. Well, but hey, you know, hey. Anyway,
you're in the right city.
You should probably get out of here before it gets dark.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yes.
All right, fair deal.
Yeah.
Let's thank everyone out there watching this to support both our channels via Patreon, because that's why we're here and able to do this. And that's how you afford this kind of posh place.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is how I afford my nice place here in the suburbs.
You can find us both at patreon.com. Thanks for watching.